16th Representative District and the Southbridge District. And I'm proud to be able to say that DENREC is showing attention to the Southbridge District. Sometimes when we think about sea level rise and water conditions, we think about the beach, not about the urban area. But fortunately enough, we have people that are in DENREC that understands that we just can't think about the beaches alone. We have to think about the urban area. And so we have a lot of things that we're looking forward to in this area, and we're proud that you're here this morning to see just exactly what we're doing. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Come here, MF. Tell them who you are, MF.
I'm really delighted to be here. It's my first full day in Delaware. I joined the Senator's staff in January. My name is Mary Frances Repko, and I'm the Deputy Staff Director of the Senate Environment Public Works Committee. I returned to the committee after 10 years on the House side, working for the House Democratic Whip, Steny Hoyer, on energy and environmental issues, and also for Mr. Hoyer when he was the majority leader of the House. And I'm happy to come back to the Environment and Public Works Committee, where I had been a staffer and had worked with Senator Carper on clean air and climate issues. So I'm really thrilled to be here today and to have an opportunity to not wear a suit and have my welly boots on and go out into the wetlands.
I love it when our staff from Washington comes to Delaware, and this is a road trip. It's
That's right.
Road trip. We're going to have fun. Sean, come up and say something for us, buddy. John Garber.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Secretary.
And I've been in my position just a little bit longer than you have, but I have a great deal of experience on the project that we're talking about today. And you know, people look at this and say, well, is this a brownfields project? Is this a climate project? Is this a environmental justice project? And what it really is a quality of life project. I think the Representative Johnson is absolutely correct that, you know, at the end of the day, our focus and investment in our urban areas and making the connection back to our environment, but also weaving together, you know, addressing flooding issues, looking at resiliency and mitigation for climate change, looking at an overall improvement in our areas. And when we look at brownfields, you know, historically, Senator, as you know, it was, well, how do we return it back into commercial use? And really, brownfields have evolved into how do we return it back to a community asset? And that's really what we're looking at and we're focusing here. And the reason we've been able to do it is because it's been a partnership across governments, nonprofit organizations, businesses, and this is really the example of how we should be focusing on the work we do, not just in the environment, but investment in urban communities. And DENREC is pleased to have been and continues to be such a big part of it. And you see all of the people around wearing the DENREC logo. And I'm so new to the job, Senator. My DENREC logo shirt doesn't, I'm not getting it until tomorrow. But this is just a prime example of the incredible work that has gone into it. And really the passion and the focus that when we're talking about natural resources and environmental and public health, that one of the most important places that we need to be focusing our attention is in the city of Wilmington and in our urban areas. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for putting this together.
Our pleasure. The president, right? The president of Wilmington City Council, Hanif Shabazz. Hanif, come here. Come on up here. We're going to put you to work right away. Hey, baby, come here.
Senator, how are you, sir?
A number of years ago, before she became president, we would talk about this part of Wilmington, Southbridge, and she told me about it doesn't have to rain very much, and we end up with a lot of water, and it really disrupts our not just transportation and ability to get to places, but really our community. And would you just take a minute and maybe share as someone who represents actually now the whole city of Wilmington, but as really particularly in this area, would you just tell us why this is important?
Well, it's important because not only do I love Southbridge, but I've been a resident here for over 35 years, raised my children and my grandchildren here. My mother also came here, so it was 4 generations. And for a community that is family-oriented as Southbridge, to have the dilemma of not knowing what's going to happen if it rains, if your car is going to be buried, or you'll be able to, or if your basement's going to be flooded, you know, that's a hard way to live. You don't want to leave because you love the area. And so what do we do about it? You know, I took that picture when we had that storm. I sent it off to my friends in high government, at that time Governor Markell, and talked to you about it, Senator, and here we are today. So now the residents of Southbridge, 4 and 5 generations of families will be able to stay in the community that they love. We'll be able to do economic development. It would now become the great neighborhood that we all know that it is. So we want to thank you.
Thank you for being a squeaky wheel. And even Siobhan.
Thank you.
All right. Jeffrey, who wants like kind of like economic development for the city of Wilmington now? Would that be you?
It is.
Yeah, this is a part of your project. I'm so happy that he's in this job, and he's always done a wonderful job for the people of Wilmington. But tell us a little bit
Thank you.
about it.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. But we have a nice agenda this morning. We're going to start out with a presentation from Susan Love on climate change and Delaware policy. Then Brian Lennon and I are going to talk a little bit about the specific project here in South Wilmington, the Wetlands Project. And then we're going to take a walk over to the Wetlands Project site. It's about 3 blocks from here. And we'll look at the project and some of the design elements.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm so thrilled that this tour is happening because it brings together 2 of my great loves in my career, climate change and the Southbridge neighborhood. I have been working on issues of climate change since about 2008, but more importantly, I have had the distinct pleasure of being able to work in the Southbridge neighborhood since about 2005. And despite how important the work that I have done and my team has done on climate change through the years, the work that I have done in Southbridge has been the most personally rewarding to me. And you know, I feel like this is my neighborhood now too, right, Hanifa? Southbridge has made me a better person. So with that, my role here today is to just tell you a little bit about climate change and to set our table for the day. We're starting here in Southbridge, and then we're going to go down south where sea level rise issues and climate change issues are also happening, and we're going to tour some of the sites that the state is working on resiliency projects for. So I just wanted to make sure that we all had today a common understanding of what's happening on the ground and what the state thinks is going to happen in the future. We have some talking points, and they're right up here on the screen, right? Climate change is happening now. It is not a problem that your grandchildren are going to have to deal with, so go ahead and get that SUV. We are seeing changes on the ground, and they're happening a little more rapidly than folks may have originally anticipated. It affects all of Delaware. It affects the people and places that we care deeply about, from Southbridge to the bars in DEWEY. This will affect all of us. Oh, no, not the bars in DEWEY. The bars in Wilmington, too. Climate change is caused mainly by human action. So I'm going to say that, and we're going to move on. And the things that we do today make a huge difference, not just for public health today, but for the health and well-being of our children and our grandchildren. Climate change is going to impact different places in much different ways. Out west, we're talking about droughts and forest fires. Here in Delaware, we're concerned about 3 primary effects of climate change: sea level rise, heavy precipitation events, and increasing temperatures. Today, we're going to be viewing many projects that are impacted by flooding, both sea level rise and increased precipitation events. But I don't want to lose the importance of increasing temperatures. 15 of the hottest years on record have happened since 2000. The facts are changing so rapidly that I can't even memorize one talking point. Like every day, every month is the hottest month, every year is the hottest year. I have to continually change my slide deck here. Confuses me quite a bit. But it is getting hotter. Temperatures are increasing. That just doesn't mean that it's going to be hotter. That means that we're going to have perhaps more mosquito issues, because when it doesn't freeze, insects don't die over the winter. And so there are a lot of other issues associated. We're going to be focusing mostly on flooding today, but I want everyone to continually think about the other impacts, the public health impacts of climate change. Many people couch climate change as an environmental issue. I would say, nay, you are incorrect. It is a economic and public health issue primarily. Will it have environmental quality and natural resource impacts? Absolutely. But will it impact humans and communities much more? Yes. And just to show you that we're already seeing changes on the ground here in Delaware, our mean annual temperature has been increasing by 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit each decade. This was I've got many more of these, and we can talk more about this today on our trip. Our state climatologist ran the numbers since the late 1800s, and yes, Delaware is getting hotter incrementally each decade. It is hotter in the state. And we anticipate that this is going to increase. As we continue to emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, our planet is warming. And by the end of century, we could be looking at between 50 and 75 days of days that hit 95 degrees and more, right? Summers are hot enough as it is. If we do a really good job of decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions, our temperatures will still increase, but it won't be as bad. And so the choices we're making today about how we get our energy, what kind of cars we drive, is going to really make a difference for the quality of life for our children and grandchildren by the end of the century. And that's one of the things I'm going to continue to talk about today as we're talking about the flooding issues. Sea levels are rising, right? They're rising right now at about a foot a century. A lot of you have seen these. But by the end of century, as we continue to emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, Delaware is looking at probably between 1 meter and 1.5 meters of additional sea level rise in the state. And that's going to have some pretty significant impacts, many of which we will see today. And so, this didn't come out as well as I wanted it to, but I just wanted to show you, we're going to 4 locations today in the state. And these locations are primarily impacted right now by sea level rise and flooding from increased precipitation. This is the South Wilmington area, and this is the South Wilmington wetland here. Without action and without significant greenhouse gas reductions, the colored points on this map could be underwater by the end of the century, right? The red is 1.5 meters, the yellow is 1 meter, and the green is 0.5 meter of sea level rise. Now, this is not the future of South Wilmington because we are working on the flooding issues. The city is paying a lot of attention to the flooding issues. The wetland project is the first of maybe numerous projects that will abate flooding here in South Wilmington. But it's important to know that without action from us, that the future here is going to be much wetter and much hotter. But we're on it, and so I'm confident that this is not the future of South Wilmington. In Odessa, we will be visiting a bridge that already goes underwater daily, that our Department of Transportation is looking to actually close. The bridge actually goes underwater every day at this point. It is. They didn't build it very well. This is the bridge we'll be visiting, and the blue represents the high tide, the daily high tide line. So over time here, although we won't be getting, because the channels are very inside, Odessa is high up on a hill. They were kind of smart. They didn't build their homes down in the marsh. But DELDOT is facing issues like this up and down, particularly in Newcastle County, where many people don't believe that sea level rise is such a huge issue. So we'll be talking to DELDOT about that today. Then we'll be going to the St. John's Reserve, which is just south of the Air Force Base. Today, the high tide line is where this blue area is. With 0.5 meter of sea level rise, the reserve facility itself begins to get cut off and is an island. With 1 meter or 1.5 meters of sea level rise, you will need a kayak to get from their driveway to the main building. The septic system will not operate properly, right? So we're actively looking at this to see what the future of this facility might be. And then Dewey Beach, right? Oh no, the bars in Dewey. They're in trouble, and we're going to be talking. We'll be talking about some of the plans that DELDOT has already. Route 1 is going underwater quite frequently. With very small nor'easters now, the road in Dewey is being closed. and they're having many more flooding issues than they used to have. We'll be visiting Dagsworthy Street here, and over time, you'll see down at the beach, because we have fortified our coastline with beach replenishment, thanks in part to the federal government's generous donations to the state for such purposes. The coastline is sort of a mini mountain, and the flooding is coming from the back bays. And it's quite tricky to deal with that because the back bays have been so heavily developed. So we'll be talking about that, and there'll be a living shoreline project down there. So I'm going to stop there. I just wanted to give you a flavor for what's happening here, what we anticipate to happen in the future, and show you where you're going to go. And now we're going to focus on the most important thing, and that is this fantastic project that would not be alive if it were not for the perseverance of Jeff Flynn.
No, I don't know
over
about
the
that,
years.
Susan. I don't know about that. We're fortunate that this project has the support of all the departments in the state and several agencies in the state and the federal government. So this is a rendering of the South Wilmington Wetlands Park. This is a great project because it combines cleanup of a brownfield, restoration of a natural resource, an existing wetland, and creation of a stormwater flooding mitigation issue, as well as creation of a new park in the city of Wilmington. It's about a 40-acre area, and after we talk about the reasons for doing the project, the problem that we're trying to solve, we're going to actually walk over and look at the site and look at some of the design elements. We'll talk a little bit more about the layout, the roads, and the park elements when we get to the site. But let's first explain a little bit about the history behind the project and why we're doing it. The project has its roots in actually planning documents that go as far back as the 1950s in the Department of Public Works. Talks about the problem here in South Wilmington. It's a low-lying area. It's slow to drain, and it's traditionally had little infrastructure. So, but in 2005, DENREC brought to the city of Wilmington the opportunity to apply for and receive a federal grant from NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA has a program called SAMP, Special Area Management Plan, lots of acronyms. Bottom line is the city and the state received funding to gather together agencies and the community here in Southbridge, identify the reasons for flooding, and talk about ways to solve them. The grant resulted in about 5 different reports. One of those was a neighborhood plan that sort of brought together all of the issues and suggested that this area of the city that we're going to go visit today, the wetland area, could function both as a park and a solution to the flooding. The SAMP plan was completed in 2006, 2007. It was then adopted by City Council in the South Walnut Urban Renewal Plan in 2009, and it was at that point that the city started planning the budget and the science for the project, and we went out and started acquisition of the key parcels. This slide shows a page from one of the studies that came out of the SAMP plan. There was a drainage study, and the gold circles represent sort of the hot spots in the neighborhood that flood when there's a heavy rain and the tide in the Christina River is elevated. And here's just a couple of photos. You can see what happens when you get a heavy rain and the tide in the river is up and the water can't drain out into the river from the streets. And another photo. I'm going to ask Brian Lennon, our city's director of surface water and surface water management. Brian's going to talk a little bit about the technicalities behind the flooding here in Southbridge.
So, as Sean was saying earlier, describing the project, I would pick the letter E, all of the above, when you're describing the different kinds of projects it is, because it's brownfield stormwater management, flooding management, stormwater quality. It actually is a project that is very unique in that it touches on so many different items. But the flooding, and can you step through? So the flooding in Southbridge is especially challenging because the city, like many industrial mid-Atlantic cities, has a combined sewer overflow system in which the same pipes that carry the sanitary flow from your plumbing fixtures are used to carry the stormwater flow that lands on the roofs and the streets and the impervious surfaces in the area. And so that makes it a very challenging issue to deal with, and I have a graphic here that'll show you. So on a normal day, our combined sewer system is designed to send all of the flow that comes out of your sanitary fixtures to the wastewater treatment plant. I have a map in my office. If any of you guys come visit, I encourage you to come and take a look at the map in my office because it's a pre-1950 sewer map, and it shows all the sewers going down to the rivers and just dumping right into the river. So in the 1950s, we built a wastewater treatment plant, and that wastewater treatment plant intercepted that flow that was going to the river and sent it to our wastewater treatment plant at 12th Street and Hay Road. So on a dry day, that flow that heads towards the river and once overflowed to the river now is actually intercepted and all goes to the wastewater treatment plant. The tide comes in, as you can see there, and the tide can go back out. Go ahead. And one more time. The tide gate that controls the outfall here remains closed during those tidal cycles to protect our sewer system from tidal flows getting into our pipes and heading down to the wastewater treatment plant. So that's how it works on a dry day. When it rains, everything changes. So at first, when it rains, during the initial portions of a storm, the flow heads down towards the river. Go ahead. At the initial portion of a storm, the combined rainwater and sanitary flow gets intercepted and sent to the wastewater treatment plant. Go ahead. And you'll see. Ironically, during an initial part of a storm, a combined sewer system actually has some benefits over a normal stormwater system in that first flush of stormwater that's landing on the streets and the oils and the grit that are on the streets actually gets sent to the wastewater treatment plant. So during the initial part of a storm, it's actually good. But as the rain continues to fall, the capacity of the pipe that takes the flow to the wastewater treatment plant is exceeded. And in order to protect the system and to protect the businesses and homes that are adjacent to the low-lying areas, the system allows that excess flow to overflow to the river. And that's what a combined sewer system is. City of Wilmington is the same as City of Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York. All of these cities have combined sewer overflow systems. The particular difficulty for Southbridge here is when the tide comes in. Go ahead. When the tide comes in, the tide gate closes to protect that system from the river. So now as the rain continues to fall and that mixed stormwater and sanitary sewage flows, it backs up into the system because the tide gate is closed. It can't get out to the river. And when it backs up into the system, it backs up into the streets. And one more time. And the excess flow that was going out to the river now is flowing back out of the inlets that were designed to carry the stormwater flow away, and now we're actually flowing in reverse and flooding out the streets with combined project. What we need is a lower elevation place than the streets of Southbridge to take that stormwater and store it in that low elevation until the tide goes back out, when we can release it back out into the river. So the location where we're going to put this is shown here on the map. It's just south of A Street, just to the east of Walnut Street, and to the west of Southbridge. One of the key aspects that I would like you guys to understand about the project, especially from my perspective on it, and it has many levels that you can look at the project, but from a stormwater management project, the key aspect is to help address the flooding in Southbridge here. We're going to go into the streets of Southbridge and separate the pipes, to separate the stormwater from the combined sewer system. And so now the stormwater that lands on these streets that are highlighted in blue will have new pipes to carry just stormwater only to our South Wilmington Wetlands Park. And store that water in the South Wilmington Wetlands Park during a storm until such time as the river levels get low enough that it can be discharged back out again. And you get the added benefit that by passing that stormwater through a natural wetland ecosystem, the quality of that stormwater that gets discharged to the river is cleaner. The volume of sewer overflows that were occurring before we constructed this will be less, so we'll be discharging less sanitary sewer flow into the rivers and discharging higher quality stormwater out to the river and helping address flooding in the meantime, plus providing a park-like amenity to the community. Go ahead. So this lists several of the key benefits of the project. You know, in terms of improving water quality, I would really like to emphasize that we are actually reducing sewer overflows to the river in addition to mitigating the flooding that happens in the area. And we're taking a historic brownfield site and cleaning it up and restoring it to an amenity that the community can use and also function as a public works feature. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah, what's interesting about this project, we've had several questions about the mosquito issues in Southbridge, and I know it's a very pernicious issue in Southbridge. Right now, that site where we're looking at is what we'd call a low functioning or a degraded wetland. It is a wetland right now. We've had work with our consultant in the Army Corps of Engineers and the state to delineate how many acres are wetlands, but it's a low functioning wetland. And so when we have a rain event, a lot of the water that runs off naturally into that area ponds up and remains stagnant for periods of time and contributes to the mosquito problem in South Wilmington. By having a high functioning wetland that's designed to function appropriately, that stormwater that's being routed to the wetland will flow in and flow out and won't pond up. And one of the other key features of the wetland that we're designing in, it's actually going to be a tidal functioning wetland. There's very few freshwater tidal functioning wetlands up and down the coast. So restoring a tidal functioning freshwater wetland is a very important thing. And so by letting that flow come in and go out, we're going to be able to control the mosquito population by having a natural population of animals and birds that will eat those mosquitoes in those cases. I would encourage you to go to Yale Environment 360. There's a very nice article with interviews from the residents of Southbridge with our project team and describing the project. And I would encourage you to go take a look at that. It's a very good article on there. And this goes back to Susan Love's. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this, but this actually shows a lower scenario than what Susan Love was presenting in here. This, I think, is only the 1 meter scenario, which had a 1.5 meter. So even after we complete this project, there's still going to be more that needs to be done to protect all of these areas in blue that would potentially be inundated in future sea level rise scenarios. So, but one of the benefits of this wetland project is now we will have a place to store that stormwater. Many of the measures that you would put in place to address this inland flooding issues would lock that stormwater in place and you would need to do something with it. So now we're building a place to store the stormwater before we do the other measures that would help reduce the flooding in the other locations. And we're going to take a walk out to the site. Oh, actually, there is one quick thing we were going to do. We'll give you an aerial overview of what the site looks like. So this right here is a drone flyover of the South Wilmington wetland site. We wanted to get a before and after shot so we could see exactly what it looked like before and have hopefully some very good photos of what it looks like there. Jeff, if you want to talk, anything in particular on the areas that we're looking at. The grooves and the phragmites there are from the equipment that drove through the area. We actually have started some of the work by doing the phragmites treatment on the site to knock down the phragmites because that's an invasive species that we don't want growing in our wetland environment. So we actually have started those treatments and we want to get those treatments in over several seasons before the construction starts. But this just gives you a general overview of the whole Southbridge.
I just want to say from an NGO standpoint that we work all around all 50 states, 70 countries. We're one 501c3, the Nature Conservancy, and so we have a pretty good purview of what's going on around the country. We have 20 cities enrolled in our in what we call the Urban Cities Network with the Nature Conservancy. Wilmington's one of those cities. So I was on a call yesterday with 20 city leads, and when I look at this project compared to all the other projects around the country, it's amazing how this stands out. It's an incredible project. The scale of it, the economic, the environmental justice component, sea level rise, flooding, climate resilience, and economic development and social development from a new city park. It's just a phenomenal project, and I just want you to know from a national perspective how significant this project is. And I also want to say thank you to Senator Carper. We are so lucky to have such a tireless, I almost want to say combatant, but I won't say that, advocate.
A happy warrior.
A happy warrior, that's the way to go. And for things like the Water Resources Development Act, the Transportation Bill, obviously oversight of EPA, so many significant things from Environment and Public Works. Senator Carper is a real champion, and I'm just proud to be a Delawarean, and I'm also proud to have Sean Garvin as our DENREC Secretary, and proud to have Mike Przicki as our Mayor. So we're in a great place right now, and thank you all for all you do.
Thanks, Richie. Nice round of applause.
And Jeff Lynn.
Last thing I want to say, this is not free. This is a lot of work, and it costs quite a bit of money. In fact, I think it's about maybe $23 million or so all in before we're done. Some of that money comes from the city, some from the state. We have a clean water state revolving fund that provides some of the money, and I think there's some money, brownfield money, EPA brownfield money as well. And from all those different sources, we have the money to do this project. When I first walked down the Riverfront in 1993 with former governor of Maryland, William Donald Schaefer, who was like the father of the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. He used to be mayor there, and he used to be governor. We walked down an industrial wasteland that used to be a great big shipbuilding area, as the mayor knows, and for years throughout World War II, 10,000 people worked down there, vibrant industrial area. The war was over, it just decayed into an industrial wasteland. And did that for 50, 60 years. And people kind of forgot about it, just kind of went to sea. Didn't even know there was a river down there. And thanks in no small part to the great work of Mike Przicki and the Riverfront Development Corporation, we transformed that. And I like to quote Albert Einstein, who used to say, "In adversity lies opportunity." And there was plenty of adversity on the riverfront. And it's not a finished project yet, but it's just amazing, the transformation that's occurred there. Something like that, different, but something like that is going to occur here. In adversity lies opportunity. And the folks who've lived here and have had to put up with not such a good lifestyle, a lot of the parts of the year are going to have a much better thing, and this a much better life. And frankly, this will make our city just a much more attractive place to live and to work. And so for everybody that's a part of this effort, I just want to say good work. And now let's go take a walk and see what we can find. Thank you so much. That's not a road.
It's a trail, it's a walking trail that'll be engineered to carry a truck because there's an easement for Delmarva for the power lines, which added significant costs to the project, but one nonetheless we need to bear. So this will be a walking connection, again connecting the Southbridge community to the riverfront area. What you can't see in this graphic, if you step out, is the new bridge that'll be built across the Christina River in this area, connecting to this new road network that you see here. And I'm going to ask Justin, would you say a few words about the science and the various plants? And
sure. Yeah.
restoration?
This area is relatively challenging. Currently, it is a sump in the area with a drainage that goes out A Street here. Sorry, turn myself around. And so with our goals of taking stormwater out of the CSO and bringing it into the park and creating a habitat that is better than what we have here, which is really Phragmites dominated, but it is wet. You can see it right over there. we had to work very hard at looking at the river, looking at all of our controls, and how we accept that stormwater without creating any additional flooding for the surrounding properties, and then also create this habitat at the same time. And we're in a challenging tidal environment, so we have a control system that we're looking at here, a self-regulating tide gate that will help us manage the water levels here. And we're taking all the stormwater here, treating it in 4 bays, and then funneling it through this habitat out this way. We've looked very hard at where we put our marsh plains, so we're trying to eliminate all of this Phragmites and get a nice natural system here. And so we used an island concept with these tidal channels to prevent that vegetative intrusion. We also have the seed source to fight, which we're going to have to do through a maintenance and monitoring plan. But we have a full native planting palette in our marsh, in our upland meadows, in our little forested wetland areas, and ultimately we're looking to replicate most of the wetland habitats you'd find throughout the state of Delaware. So we do have that potential educational opportunity to talk about marshes, shrub-scrub wetlands, some deciduous and some coniferous wetlands. We have all of those different types of plants here in the system.